morning to you and welcome to This Morning on Asake, a show brought to you by Cite View, your trusted source for independent news. I am Nonhlanhla Mapigwa and I always look forward to insightful conversations on governance, current affairs, and stories are shaping Zimbabwe. So today, we are discussing the future of Zimbabwe's judiciary and the lessons from the Malaba era. And our guest today in studio, we have Doug Coltart. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nonhlanhla. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Thank you for sparing us your time. And online, we have Dr. Musa Kika. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Nonhlanhla. Good morning, Doug. Thank you for having me.
Morning, Musa.
Well, thank you so much. We are waiting for Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda to also join us. Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda, please do accept the mic on your end. I see you there. On the listeners, please do accept the mic and become a speaker as well. So today's discussion focuses on a pivotal moment for Zimbabwe's judiciary as Chief Justice Luke Malaba's retirement has been set for May 2026, bringing to an end a tenure that has been both influential and deeply contested, particularly following constitutional amendments that allowed the extension of his term beyond the original retirement age, also raising questions about judicial independence, separation of powers, and executive influence over the courts. So as a country, people have been asking, will he really retire? What are the lessons from his tenure? And of course, what happens next? So this morning, I'm happy that we have Doug here with us, Musa, as well as Vusumuzi joining us to unpack all these issues. I see Vusumuzi has joined us there. Good morning.
Good morning, Nonhlanhla, and good morning to Doug and Dr. Musa and the listeners. Thank you for inviting me.
Morning.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sibanda, for sparing us your time and expertise this morning. So my first question, I'll direct it to Dr. Musa. Dr. Musa, as I've said, people have been asking, will CJ Malaba retire when the time has come, as the JSC has announced that he'll be retiring in May? And is there anything really to read into the statement that they issued?
Well, thank you so much, Nonhlanhla. Firstly, good morning and welcome to Dr. Sibanda and to those who are also just joining us. Thank you for raising this very important topic for us to discuss today. Now, we have not heard from Chief Justice Malaba himself speak on the retirement issue, but what we have is a statement from the Judicial Service Commission, which they released on 17 January this year, purportedly to clarify some media misinformation, as they say. And in that statement, we are told that Malaba CJ's last day in office will be the 14th of May, 2026. Now, this will be the end of his controversial 5-year extended term, which started sometime in 2021, 15 May. And you will remember that his controversial tenure extension was enabled by an equally controversial amendment to the Constitution of Zimbabwe that was passed that same month in May 2021. So even going by those controversial amendments and the controversial term extension, his 5 years are up now. There is simply no legal runway anymore under the Constitution to allow him to remain in office. His time is done. So nothing short of another dubious amendment to the Constitution could possibly save him. If by the 15th of May this year he is still in office, he will simply be an illegal Chief Justice. Although I'm sure that the powers that be would still have wanted him in office, especially ahead of what might be potential challenges to the upcoming amendment number 3 to the Constitution and the so-called Agenda 2030. But unfortunately, there is simply no legal runway anymore for the Chief Justice to remain in office.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Musa, for clarifying that for us. Dr. Vusumuzi, any comments, any further comments on that?
Thank you very much, Nhlanhla. Well, look, I think as Dr. Musa has basically said, remember the 5-year term was born out of, the unscrupulous acts of, this particular regime. And we are also alive to the fact that, it was, and I mean, it was the amendment was passed in May. So there's still quite a few months anyway. Anything can happen. Anything is possible, with ZANU-PF. And there is nothing that is legal with what basically is happening in the country. And we know that, Chief Justice Malaba obviously has served, at the pleasure and to the interests and benefit of, President Mnangagwa. And obviously, these are good friends. And if Mnangagwa wants to continue, I suppose you must remember that ordinarily, these are the 3, legs of, of government and arms of the, government in the Trust Politica. So I suppose that if President Mnangagwa wants to continue as the head of the executive, Malaba might as well say, look, I also want to continue as the head of the judiciary. So we need to try and see what shenanigans, we can come up with. And surely, I think it would not surprise you if we wake up tomorrow and we are told that the Chief Justice can continue up to the age of 80 if he's still healthy and, he's got the health certificate. Nothing stops them from doing that because ordinarily, the Constitutional Court quashed the idea that age can be used as a term limit, albeit we know that indeed it is, part of what we refer to as a term limit. So anything is very possible, with these guys.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Vusumuzi, for sharing also those views on that. Earlier on, it was highlighted that it was a controversial tenure and a lot happened and so forth. But I'd like us to look back and say, what are the lessons from Malaba's tenure? Starting with you here, Doug, what are the lessons?
Yeah, sure. I think if we look back at Chief Justice Malaba's tenure, and not just as Chief Justice, but as a judge, I think we see in Chief Justice Malaba someone who is an intellect, is someone who really understands the law, and if we look back, there's some landmark judgments that he handed down. The ones that come to mind are the Muzuru judgment, which ended a child marriage. This was a landmark judgment that was hailed around the world. I think, of course, as well, his dissenting opinion in the Jealousy Mawarire case, where he very boldly and bravely stood, for the Constitution against the majority that, essentially forced the nation into an election in 2013. And so, we see some of these judgments which demonstrate, a real jurist and a man of courage. And that is partly why I'm so pained that his tenure then was or his legacy was undermined by the controversial extension of his tenure, which undermined core principles of our Constitution, such that incumbents should not benefit from the extension to their tenure. As well as some of the other aspects of his or the administrative aspects of his tenure as Chief Justice, as well as some of the judgments that we can get into. I think that then will become, unfortunately, I think the lasting legacy of what people will remember Chief Justice as the Chief Justice who didn't leave power when his tenure came to an end. That is a great shame for someone who really had all the markings of going down in the history books as being a real jurist, of the stature of other great Chief Justices in our country and our region, people like Enoch Dumbuchena. If we look in South Africa, people like Pius Langa, who, when they came, they sat on the bench, they delivered their judgments, and when their time to go came, they went. The fact that you are even asking the question, I would like to believe, on your first question, I would like to believe that Chief Justice Malaba will not try to extend again. I really hope, for his sake and for his legacy, that's true. But the fact that we are even asking that question, that there's been an announcement and this question is still on people's lips, the fact that this issue was not sort of settled months ago, as the Chief Justice in the UK has announced that he's retiring in January 2027. So that there's this long succession plan. The fact that we're even having this conversation is very unfortunate and should never be the case. And I hope that this is a real lesson that Chief Justice Malaba's successors, as well as all those in various other positions in government, including the president, will know that this type of thing ends up tainting someone's legacy.
Wow, quite interesting reflections there, Doug. And I'd like to hear from Dr. Musa as well. What are the lessons from Malaba's tenure, Dr. Musa?
Yeah, Doug is very correct, to say Justice Malaba is someone who actually, knows the law. He rose through the ranks. He didn't start as Chief Justice. He has been around for a very long time. He knows the law. So whatever was happening with his decisions really was not out of ignorance. But we learn a lot of things from his tenure about being a judge, about judiciaries and their role, about the rule of law, about democracy. At an individual level, one also can learn how not to be a judge, or the kind of judge that one should not be, on account of these many things that Doug has just outlined. We also learn, how sometimes good judges or potentially good judges can turn into, the opposite. When he was appointed Chief Justice around March 2017, that was following the retirement of the then Chief Justice Godfrey Chijikausiku. You might recall that the Law Society and many lawyers actually supported Justice Malaba's appointment as Chief Justice. That was on account of some of the really good decisions he had handed down before that, including when he was Deputy Chief Justice. But then shortly thereafter, Malaba CJ proved to be, in quotes, a good successor to Godfrey Chijikausiku, particularly to the powers that be. Especially insofar as, he proved to be useful in some political controversies that then followed through in his tenure. The case of Justice Mawarire, Jelas Mawarire versus Mugabe has been mentioned by Doug, a 2013 decision. That case, when Chief Justice Chijikausiku made a dubious judgment that effectively ended the GNU, led us into an early election, Justice Malaba was Deputy Chief Justice then, and he braved it, and he rendered the only dissenting opinion in that decision. And dissenting opinions are not a common thing in our judiciary. So that goes to show the kind of judge and independent-mindedness he had at the time. And one then wonders what happened. But what happened is that we then learn that the law and courts are not innocent of politics, political manipulation, as well as political agendas. We learned through this tenure that, much of the misgovernance and misrule that we have seen in Zimbabwe has actually been enabled and facilitated by the courts. So the courts can be enablers, to misgovernance. We also learn about selective constitutional avoidance and selective application of the law. One can be a good judge if they decide, but they can also be a bad judge at the same time if they want, depending on the case in front of them. So you would see that political and human rights cases tended to be ruled on in a political manner, while some softer cases, softer in courts, would receive some good judgments. But that's not how the rule of law works. When you reflect back and you look at what has happened, you also notice that a lot of lawfare has been enabled. And that's the use of the legal system to persecute, to judicialize politics, which is using the judiciary to fight political battles, to capture parliament, to dismantle political opponents, etc., etc. Performative democracy, which is something that is very useful to autocrats. And I would borrow a metaphor from one Nigerian human rights lawyer who said, some of our rulers have been drunk on power, and some judges have handed the bottle that has made politicians drunk on power. And when one reflects at this tenure of the current Chief Justice, one would be tempted to say this might be a very good descriptor of what happened in that period. But when one looks at this tenure, we also learn, importantly, the need for individual independence as a judge. So, lack of independence of the judiciary as a whole is one thing, but lack of independence of an individual judge is also quite another, particularly when that individual judge is a judicial leader, whether you're a Chief Justice, you're a Deputy Chief Justice, or you're a Judge President. Now, I'll give you a few instances that raise concern during this tenure. This is the same Chief Justice who, sometime in 2020, must have been July, once issued a practice directive for judges to submit judgments to heads of courts for approval. And this was only reversed after a public outcry and after judges of the High Court publicly protested on this. We would also recall just recently, 2025, sometime in July, when judges were to be taken to the Chitempo School of Ideology, a political party, ideology school. And this was only reversed again after a lot of public outcry. You go back a few years, in November 2017, when the coup happened, a case came the following year in 2018. It's called Liberal Democrats and Four Others versus President of Zimbabwe. And that case was decided by Chief Justice Malaba. He essentially ruled that President Robert Mugabe had freely resigned, had not been coerced, essentially legitimating the coup that had happened. That's quite some dubious jurisprudence, which is commonplace in places where coups are commonplace and judiciaries are known to play to the whims of the executive. We also see that this Malaba CJ-led bench, together with the Chijikawasiku one, were supposed to usher the country into a new constitutional dispensation, in the sense that they were charged with interpreting and developing a new jurisprudence under our new 2013 constitution. Unfortunately, much of the jurisprudence that has come on important constitutional matters, if it's not laughable, then it's shocking. It's only in very few cases, especially the so-called softer cases, women's rights, children's rights, where you see, some sensible jurisprudence emanating. You also would recall the point that I made, that you don't see dissenting opinions from our judiciary, particularly the superior courts, Supreme Court and Constitutional Court, even separate concurring opinions. And that's a highly unusual situation, even bizarre situation, because judges cannot always agree on everything, where everyone simply comes and say, I agree on everything. That shows you that there is something fundamentally wrong. It could be judicial laziness, it could be a lack of robustness, or just lack of individual independence. What else could explain it? So these are some of the issues. You also notice one of the things that we complain about as lawyers is the use of technicalities and procedural issues to avoid pronouncements on important issues, particularly human rights, constitutional and political issues. So the courts have become players in technicalities as opposed to substance, in express violation of what the Constitution says. Technicalities should never trump substance. And that's not normal practice of the law, but it's now normal in Zimbabwe, which is truly an abnormal situation. So in sum, unfortunately, despite starting so well, despite having some really good landmark judgments, Chief Justice Malaba leaves behind, quite a tale of destruction and, unfortunately with a tainted legacy.
Well, profound, Dr. Musa. Thank you so much for those reflections. And let's hear from Dr. Vusumuzi. What are the lessons from the Malaba era, Dr. Vusumuzi?
Thank you very much, Nonhlanhla. Well, look, I think in my view, obviously, I might be seen to be slightly more harsh, not even being, willing to acknowledge anything that I think he's done good, because I think, like what Dr. Musa said, basically is that on issues that were not, except for the, Mawarire case, without much political motivation, or where the buck was supposed to stop with him, he was never there. In fact, he has actually perpetuated what has caused, Zimbabwe to be, crying and in dire hunger for many years. Well, as Dr. Musa would have, referred right now to the Liberal Democrats case, I have got personal scars with Chief Justice Malaba because that was my application, and obviously, I was, the head of the Liberal Democrats, and I did those, founding affidavit, and the mere fact that, before him, he went on to sit down and he even gave, a cost order on an application where it was clandestinely withdrawn. And when we went to the court to find out what exactly happened, did we receive a message that the matter had been withdrawn, and we're told that it's withdrawn, nothing can be done, that's over. And on the day of the court, for him to then proceed and sit down and have the audacity, basically to make such proclamations in such a full judgment, that's, I think I don't think he's intelligent. I think he's the dumbest person that, in my view, has ever existed, because...
Dr. Vusumuzi?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Vusumuzi. Here at Cite, we respect our leadership. We respect each other as well in terms of our submissions. And please, I would like you to, tone down, the speech, and also avoid even insulting others.
Okay, noted, Nonhlanhla. Thank you very much. Well, look, unfortunately, if you live in democracies where you can describe, what you think about a person, you think it has become common cause that, everybody should be, described in that manner. But I understand completely, and I'll try and, maybe shy away from that. But I think all I'm saying is basically that if you preside over a system that does not respect the very constitution, the very, spirit of what makes you exist, to the extent that you're willing to perpetuate, for example, as I think it was Dr. Musa again, or Doug, who mentioned the issue of, some of the things that we borrow, from, even the South African Constitution, where we see that the incumbency, one should not benefit, from, a term extension. We had a judgment that was used, in the court arguments, the Constitutional Court and the High Court, a South African case, which, sought to extend, the Chief Justice of South Africa's, term, but which is completely different from what we're sitting at. So if you have a person who will not be willing to recuse themselves in a matter that pertains to them, where you would have a fight, on the basis that, people want to protect. There is nothing ethical, in my view, especially as a legal mind and a legal person, because, if somebody says, the argument that we've had in the Constitutional Court, one would not real belief that the Chief Justice was not aware, even, in that judgment, where, the justice that said they were saying, look, there is no need to recuse, ourselves because we were acting judges. Now, we are substantive and all that kind of, those views. I mean, it can tell you that this is something that had been set around, and because, Chief Justice Malaba has been the head and presiding over that. So you've got a shame sitting. And you've got a situation where people are willing to sit and defend something because it benefits them, and particularly him and his ethos and ethics as a legal person, fit and proper test. What says, are you fit and proper, as a legal, mind? As we go down, the line, now that he's out, this will go many, many years down the line to say, was Malaba ever fit and proper to be the Chief Justice, of the country, especially insofar as, the extension, of the terms are concerned, and how, this was, decided. Because look, as the Chief Justice, we've seen a very good example of the Chief Justice, who stood for what he believed in. That was Mukwege in South Africa, who even decided when things were not going the way that he believed, he went 9 months before his term was done and took his leave. And then, that was how he went for good. Now, and if you look at such, outstanding performances where he would not shy away, for example, Mukwege did not shy away from making pronouncement against, the government, against, the leaders. The very appointer who was President Zuma, he gave scathing judgments, against, President Zuma. When people actually thought that he was appointed, he was unknown, and he was obviously, going to be used. So once you are appointed and you're a judge, you know that the powers that are given to you, if you're on the straight and you're doing right, nobody can touch you unless maybe if you're afraid that they will murder you or something like that, or if one has been threatened, you would know if anything of that nature, does exist. But in all fairness, I think that it is very unfortunate that we've got people that are supposed to lead us in the judiciary, being, synonymous maybe to those in the executive that obviously maybe might appear to be, working in cahoots to try and oppress, the people, to try and take away access to justice, from the people, and to try as much as is possible to cling to power when people the world over are trying to make sure that, the judiciary as an institution is supposed to curtail, is supposed to reduce the power and the ability of, the executive as politicians to abuse authority and to cut down on the state of, on the power of the state, which is used arbitrarily against the people. So the tenure, in my view, of Chief Justice Malaba has been nothing, more than that, just a situation where we did not have, a judiciary, but where we had the office of the judiciary sitting in the executive, rubber stamping the decisions, that were made, by the executive. If, for example, we take, we have regards to the constitutional amendments that have taken place, all the constitutional amendments, including the one that deals with the judiciary, which was an import of the old constitution about the appointment, of judges, and where, for example, it is practice. Our law is, Roman Dutch law is influenced by South African law, where, for example, the Chief Justice, anybody that's supposed to come in their public interviews, judges sit down and interview, and where you basically have an amendment that says we're not going to have the Chief Justice, being interviewed by his subordinates and all this and that. That on its own, it shows you that we have got a very serious problem when it comes to the kind of democracy that we have, because, it is the people that elect the president who in turn, presides over them. We might as well be saying maybe, people should not have a say, in the president because he's going to be their superior in a way, or going to be the first, citizen. So I think, for me, Chief Justice Malaba has been a nightmare in the manner that he has presided over the judiciary, and he's leaving behind serious chaos. When people would have expected a little much more, considering those, the dissenting judgment that he had, people were more happy and thinking that, sanity is going to prevail. But in fact, it has been the worst nightmare that the country has had to experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Vusumuzi, for those reflections. Guys, if you are just joining us, welcome to this morning on Asake. Today we are discussing the future of Zimbabwe's judiciary and the lessons from the Malaba era. Our guest this morning in studio, we have Douglas Coltart. We also have Dr. Musa Kika online and Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda. They are both online. So today we reflect on, CJ Malaba's era, and also there are questions on, what happens next, and of course, how is the appointment of the next Chief Justice going to be done, and what does it mean also after, such reflections this morning. So please do request the mic, guys. If you would like to engage with our guests, please do request the mic and we'll give you a chance to speak. And remember, as Cite, we encourage that people express themselves, share their views, and avoid insulting others, avoid hate speech, and also undermining our leadership. So I hope that I'll be hearing from you soon. I hope that you keep the comments coming as well in the comments section. So, Dr. Kika, you did touch on, the relationship between the executive and the judiciary. What did Malaba's tenure expose about the relationship between the executive and the judiciary in Zimbabwe?
Well, the relationship ought to be one of checks and balances, particularly with the judiciary fiercely defending and maintaining its independence, having fidelity to the law and to the constitution alone, and ruling, on cases brought before it purely on the basis of the law, what the law says. But unfortunately, because of, the record, which is quite public, we see that we have what one could call an incestuous relationship between the executive and the judiciary in the country, and we have seen the dangers of that relationship. One could go on to say we have a judiciary that has become pro-executive in terms of how it approaches governance issues, cases that are brought before it that have a bearing on governance. First of all, the point has been made that, when the Chief Justice is in office for 5 more years because of a controversial term extension made by the president, then you have a problem. Problem in terms of how that relationship and situation is perceived, but also in terms of how it actually plays out. And this is not the first time that we have seen this kind of situation. In South Africa, it happened in 2011 when the then president, Jacob Zuma, tried to extend the tenure of Chief Justice Andile Ngcobo by 5 more years. That was after his 12-year term had ended. Chief Justice Ngcobo was forced to withdraw his acceptance to this extension because some South Africans had gone to court to challenge the president's conduct. So that's what ought to happen. As a Chief Justice or a judge, you resign when those situations happen. But unfortunately, that's not what we have seen in our case. Chief Justice Malaba has lived out his 5 years, of a controversial term. So we see that there is a bit of erosion of confidence in terms of the independence of the judiciary when it comes to how it interacts with the executive. I will share with you, a conversation that I once had some time back in 2021 in Harare. It was with a very senior official in the Ministry of Justice. And at that time, we were just beginning to have discussions and debates about amendment number 2 to the Constitution. And I remember debating the proposed amendments and saying this was illegal for these amendments to sail through in the way they did and for them to then benefit an incumbent judge or chief justice, and that someone would challenge that in court. And that senior official turned to me and said, well, when that challenge is brought before the courts, then who's going to be there to make that decision? And indeed, when that happened, when the challenge was brought, we saw that, the court that the Chief Justice presides was there to defend him, and they succeeded in that. This is confidence that the executive was displaying on the judges or on the judiciary, and vice versa. And it ought not to be like that. Confidence in the wrong way. Confidence in that the judges will make the right decision in courts when a challenge is made. And that's not how it ought to be. And there are many other examples. This is just an example I'm citing. When you look at the recent election, 2023 election, everything in that election was litigated. Everything. From election dates to the voters' roll, everything, including blocking candidates like Kasukwere. That was all the job of the judiciary. It was the judiciary, that lended its service quite well to the executive of the day. You go back to the 2018 election challenge, and the kind of ruling that came out there. You would know that that's a ruling that has subsequently been criticized by other African courts that have had to deal with challenges of election results. That particular challenge is cited, with critique in those decisions. It's therefore no wonder that an amendment to the Constitution then comes later on, which I personally characterize as unconstitutional because it ran counter to the spirit of the Constitution. And then it's used to benefit an incumbent, again in an unlawful way, for 5 more years. It seems like a reward of sorts. It seems like a statement of sorts to say we need this individual because they are of service to us. And you can imagine the kind of perception that then creates. So the evidence simply points to the two arms of state in bed, which is not how it ought to be.
Wow, quite interesting, Dr. Kika. Any additions, Doc?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that on the point that Musa is making about public perception, we actually have the data on this. Afrobarometer conducts data on public perception of various institutions. And if you look at public trust in the courts, Afrobarometer conducts their opinion polls of, after a number of years. And between the opinion poll conducted in 2017 and the one conducted in 2022, there's a drop in public trust of the courts by almost 10 percentage points, which is a pretty drastic drop. Now, I'm not a data scientist, and we don't know exactly what the reason was for that drop. It could have been the manner in which the 2018 election was handled and the more than a year that it took for the full judgment to come out of that. It could have been the way that the judiciary was weaponized during the January 2019 protests. It could have been this issue that we've been discussing, the extension of Chief Justice Malaba's tenure, and then the attacks on the judiciary by the executive when a brave High Court or 3 brave High Court judges actually sought to uphold the Constitution. We don't know exactly what it was, but we have the data to say that there was a significant drop in public trust in the judiciary, and this is something that we as a nation have to address. It's not a good situation for people to feel that sense of uncertainty about, can we trust the courts? Are our courts independent or not? This is something that we need to figure out. How do we going forward ensure that we build confidence in the judiciary and in all of our institutions, that they are there to serve the people of Zimbabwe rather than individuals?
Indeed, Doug, and I hope that we're going to work on that as a nation. I see we have a speaker there. Good morning, Madube.
Good morning, Notlata. How are you?
I'm very well. Please do go ahead and ask your question or share your submission.
It's just a question. Do you guys who are the possible candidates that will replace the Chief Justice? Is there a front runner? Who do you guys predict will be the next Chief Justice? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Madube. Dr. Musa, Dr. Vusumuzi, Doug, anyone, if you would like to respond, Dr. Musa or Dr. Vusumuzi, you can raise your hand. But I'll start with Doug.
Sure. So, look, I'm not going to drop names because I don't know, which is half the problem, right? And this is what I want to address. What I want to speak about is the process for appointment of the next Chief Justice. And in terms of the now amended Constitution, Section 180, the President appoints the Chief Justice after consultation with the Judiciary. That's the short answer. The long answer, as Dr. Sibanda pointed out, that is not what our Constitution originally said. When we, as the people of Zimbabwe, went to the referendum in 2013 to vote on our new Constitution, over 90% of us voting yes for it, Section 180 said that they set out a very clear and transparent process for the appointment of the Chief Justice. There should be public interviews. There should be advertisements. Then there should be public interviews. And then a list should be compiled, based on the public interviews. And then an appointment is made from that. Amendment number 1 is what? Scrap that for the Chief Justice. But this is the point that I want to make, is that the fact that it was scrapped as a legal requirement for us to have a transparent process for the appointment of the Chief Justice does not stop those involved, the President and the JSC, from still going through a transparent process, right? And we have a precedent for this in South Africa, because South Africa doesn't have the legal requirement for this full transparent process for their Chief Justice. And yet, because they are they understand the importance of public trust in the judiciary, when they appoint a Chief Justice, they have, of their own volition, gone through this process. Not just advertising, but actually seeking nominations from the public. Then you get the nominations, you see who you get, you draw up a short list, you then put them through a public interview so that the public can see this is a person of competence, this is a person of integrity. And then when an appointment is made, you've built that public confidence. So that is what I would urge the JSC and the President to do in the process now. We now have an opportunity to change course, to actually build public perception. They should, now that they've announced that Chief Justice Malaba is retiring, they should immediately put out a call for public nominations so that the public can nominate people, draw up a shortlist, etc. Go through a transparent process so that when the next appointment is made, people can see that this is a person of competence who can lead our judiciary in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that, Doug. Dr. Vusumuzi, any additions?
Yes, thank you. And I'm heartbroken, and I'm with the sorrows that Mr. Coltart has just said, that look, we only wish we could go back, but obviously, because now this is supreme law that the President must appoint, and we know that the reason why that should not have happened in the first place is specifically so that whoever is appointed as, the Chief Justice must be independent from the appointer. But in this case, now that person is fully, a beneficiary of the President's whims, or rather choices. And as a result, that person cannot free themselves, from, the appointer. One would have thought, I think, that Chiweshe was likely to come in, considering the judge might have come in and his history from the army. But we obviously see that things, have been going, otherwise, and people have been, it clearly shows that people have been meeting. I mean, we've seen, some, clandestine or some sort of, mind meeting, especially of the judges, especially when you have got particular regard to the judgment, that was trying to deal with the appointment of Chief Justice, Malaba. You would notice that, judges, even the judges of the High Court, where, for example, they had said that the constitutional amendment was invalid. Now, if you listen or you read through to see what then happened, in the Constitutional Court, you'll notice that it appeared as if they were saying it was a taboo to say that that amendment, was invalid, because then it was saying that what the president has done is done something that is wrong. So there is no one that can, from the legal fraternity, that can critique, or what the president has basically done or said. It would appear that instead of people operating on an equal footing and taking the responsibility to protect, because the main role of the judiciary is to protect people mainly from the powers of government of the state that can easily be abused. So Maduwe's question as to who real comes in now, unfortunately, it is not really about who do we think is a front runner, because remember, we don't have a say. None of us has got a say, but the president, as you will notice that even from the onset, the first amendment that we had was actually removing the fact that, or allowing the president not to appoint from those people that were given to him, and not even give reasons why he would not do that. So our democracy has always been tainted in such a manner that the checks and balances, the safe measures, the valves that were put in to ensure that you can check and even take to court a particular behavior if you think that it is not clear or it violates certain principles, they were ordinarily removed always. So as it stands right now, we're right in the open desert, in the midst of a scorching sun, where whoever comes in is going to come in because the president wants that person to come in. And if the president, presumes that the person who's coming in has got more energy and is going to make sure that, the amendment that is coming in that they want to bring in, because as I said earlier on, that look, in terms of the Constitution, there is no way that the president, the current president of the country can remain. They can go ahead and do, the amendment, but there is no way that the current president can then, benefit from that amendment. But we must then remember that the same issue had arisen and a clause was put in, I think it's section 186 subsection 4 or so, which said, notwithstanding, section 328 subsection 7, of the Constitution. Now, that, and the interpretation to that, it actually, brought in a lot of discourse and arguments in the judgment that took place in the Constitutional Court. But the truth of the matter is that it was basically saying that that was going to be the situation, and, to a greater extent, it was trying to trivialize. And that is what I think, that was what Advocate Uriri was trying to say section 186 subsection 4 was now trumping section 328 subsection 7, so that that provision, that term limit extension could then go ahead without having to bring, a referendum. So we are seeing a situation where there is a struggle right now, where the country is positioning itself, especially in the executive, to bring in a new Chief Justice who's going to make sure that 2030 is going to happen, because then the Constitution will then be manipulated to the extent that that very provision, section 328 subsection 7 and 8 and 9, are likely to be removed from the Constitution or amended, to allow for, these, dubious, I think, changes to take place. So unfortunately, this is the kind of legacy that we really are talking about, that it began, the bulk of it began when President, Mnangagwa, remember section 180 again, I think it was, if my memory serves me well, President Mnangagwa was probably, in justice, and he's the one that brought in, the amendments to section 180. I know, I can't remember if it was the justice then, but I know very well it was him that brought it in, and he brought it in so that he could continue to control the judiciary, because it was something that was perceived as well that he was going to come in after President Mugabe. So we are seeing a situation where every one of us is being manipulated in order to ensure that, the desires of the executive are taking place. So we're as good as people that do not have a judiciary at all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Vusumuzi, for responding to that. And Dr. Kika, any additions, or maybe we can then go ahead and look at what challenges lie ahead, in maintaining independence, public trust, and the rule of law in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the issue that we are dealing with, it goes beyond the individual Chief Justice who's in charge of the judiciary at any point in time. It's an issue about judicial reform in Zimbabwe, broadly speaking. Under a different set of circumstances, I think we will need to think seriously about what we are going to do as Zimbabweans to overhaul our judiciary and our judicial system and how we approach issues of justice. So we are talking about broader judicial reforms here. We need to relook our concept, our understanding of the concepts of justice, constitutionalism, and rule of law in a significant way. What we have right now has some serious loopholes. The amendments that have been spoken to, you would know that both amendment number 1 and 2 to the Constitution had significant portions dealing with judges, right? And it's no wonder why, because the judiciary is so important in so far as it can facilitate or destabilize one's agenda if one doesn't have a clean governance agenda. And those amendments simply have to be reversed. They are regressive, and that's a big challenge that we have. Without addressing that, to Madube's question, very likely we are going to have someone, of a Chitepo School of Ideology orientation becoming our Chief Justice for obvious reasons, So, we shouldn't really be holding our breath as to who is coming next. What enables that? It's because of the whole architecture that we have, which we need to reform. So whoever is there as Chief Justice is just a symptom of the broader problem. That's the problem that we need to address. We need to address issues of a battered public trust, a bench that is perceived to be anti-people, justice that is perceived to be unjust. We need to have a court whose fidelity is to the law and to the Constitution alone, and nothing else, not to the executive. We need to have a system that allows us to appoint the finest and the best amongst us to be judges, who are able to fiercely defend their independence and bring robustness to the bench. That's what we need. We need a judiciary that is not beholden to the executive. And currently, because of what has happened and because of the legal and political architecture that we have, reversing that is going to be, quite some work. But we have to do that. Another big challenge is that we have a plethora of what I would call wrong jurisprudence, which our courts will have to undo, particularly constitutional jurisprudence that we have to undo. That's going to take a long time. That's not going to be a walk in the park. But, the jurisprudence that's there is going to be, something that we will continue to face as a challenge as Zimbabweans in the coming few years. So these are just some of the challenges that lie ahead. It's a systemic issue as opposed to just an individual. Discussing an individual is narrowing it down to a symptom as opposed to what we really need to address as a people. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kika. Dr. Vusumuzi, looking ahead, what challenges lie ahead?
Thank you again, Anatala. Well, look, I think the first thing that we need to look at is what, Mr. Coltart was basically saying, that, we need to revert, to the Constitution. At least we need to revert to before the first constitutional amendment, because that mischief theory that brought in those changes was meant to try and make sure that the judiciary is no longer separate from, the executive, but they become one and the same thing, and give, total autonomy of the executive over the judiciary. So you cannot, separate, between the two anymore. The other one has become subservient, to the other, particularly the judiciary. So the only way that we can have, a way that takes us forward in the same manner that, Parliament, for example, it was President Mnangagwa who was Minister of Justice and Parliamentary, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, up until 2017 October. The very thing that he did to bring in that amendment. I think as the people, because we have not trust in Parliament, I don't know how this goes, because even the opposition, members of Parliament, I don't know if they have any interest to that. Of course, there is a majority, but that's a problem. So some of the things may need to be done just to show that, there is a desire to move away, even if you ultimately know that you're not going to to get anything out of it. I mean, a very good example is, let me again refer to, the Liberal Democrats case against, President Mnangagwa that we had in 2018, which was, scandalously withdrawn. We knew that we were not going to win that case, but we had crafted and done our papers in such a manner that anyone who would have to read or would have followed that particular judgment would have sat down and laid bare the kind of unscrupulous activities or the kind of, the governance that we had, because we believed and continue to believe that what happened in Zimbabwe was a coup. Remember, we managed to set, President Mugabe, the late President Mugabe, that application at his house, which led to people being fired when we had done that. And we had spoken to him, and he had said, look, he was very happy because, he did not resign. So that was the reason why ultimately we had the withdrawal. But all what we wanted to show was that Parliament was lying, and everyone else was lying to say that President Mugabe had resigned. That is why that could not happen. So all I'm trying to say is what we need now. We need the people of Zimbabwe, not to a huge extent, to not try and follow and do only what Parliament has done, but to be the one that really stand up and say, we need our constitution to revert back to a system where the Chief Justice and the Judge President, the Deputy, are appointed, through a system that we had voted for in 2013. It's just over 10 years, and this was changed barely 5 years after it came into being. What could have been so wrong with our minds as the people, to the extent that barely 5 years after we've put in a new constitution would have to be changed? It would clearly be that it does not serve the interests of, the leaders that be, or the powers that be, but it serves the interests of the people. So we need to revert to that position. But in order to do that, so that we've got a sane judiciary, we need the people now, because, using President Mnangagwa's words that says, the voice of people is the voice of God. We need the people now not being represented by these, parliamentarians who serve and who show that, they are more, fearful or respectful of the president rather than the people that vote them into power. So we need a change in the manner in which, this power, moves around, particularly from the masses, to try and ensure that we can revert, because as long as we do not revert to that constitutional order, then there is no way that our justice system or the judiciary is ever going to be independent and function properly, because in order for that to happen, we know that ZANU-PF as it stands, that is why they moved, what was resolved at ZANU-PF Congress must now, the Minister of Justice, Legal, must now start to kick in the systems of changing the constitution. That shows that ZANU-PF is going to continue to manipulate the constitution so that it becomes what it wants, uses it as a document that enables it, to rule over people and to decree and do things, willy-nilly. That is what Dr. Kika is talking about. Dr. Musa is talking about when he talks about the issue of constitutionalism. So we do not have constitutionalism, in Zimbabwe. And in order for us to attain that, at least bare minimum of that is for us to start by saying, let us go back to the 2013 constitution. We may then look at the independence, maybe the need for, other, institutions that are meant, to support, democracy and constitution, in order to make sure that we've got that level of freedom. But as it stands, our major concern here is the judiciary. And the judiciary can never function freely as long as, the Chief Justice, the heads of judiciary, are directly appointed by the president in consultation is just something that is cosmetic, because we know that that's what that means is basically that it is the president's word that must be followed. And once we have got that, then we know that we have a completely partisan and we have a completely individual-based, kind of a judiciary that serves to the interests of the person who is the current, president at that particular moment. And maybe our starting point should be, can we attain that position without ensuring that we revert to the 2013 constitution? Otherwise, it means we might need to have another, amendment of the constitution, but which then, brings us to a position similar to that or even better. And maybe we need another referendum, one who real knows, because we don't know what is going to happen now, seeing that we've got the 2030, issue, because as I was saying that there is no way that it can real happen, in such a manner that it will benefit, President Mnangagwa to continue up until 2030. Now that there is no way that that will happen, one wonders what's going to happen. Another kind of a coup of some sort, and how is that going to take place? That means the constitution will be amended. So where are the people? What are we there for saying? We need the judiciary to be on the same footing with, the executive and the legislature, which is basically what, constitutional should be, where we have got these checks and balances. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Vusumuzi. And Doug, looking ahead, what lies ahead and what challenges lie ahead?
Yeah, well, the challenges are immense, and I think they've been outlined by our other speakers. I think where I would like to land this is for us, as the people of Zimbabwe, to look at our own agency in this. And that includes, of course, all of the judges and magistrates that are on the judiciary, who each have of course, the judiciary must be independent institutionally, but they each also have a duty of fidelity to the Constitution to be independent individually. And each of them have an opportunity each and every day to exercise that independence that they are meant to do. And each one of us, whether we are judges or we are lawyers or we're journalists or whatever role we have, all of us have agency. All of us have power. All of us, especially when we use our power collectively, we have immense power. Our Constitution explicitly says that all power flows from the people of Zimbabwe. Executive, legislative, judicial power flows from us, the people of Zimbabwe. And we have a decision each and every day to exercise our agency, to stand up for what is right, to make sure that our conscience is right before God, that we do what we know is in front of us that we need to do to advance our country, to be a better country for our children and our children's children. That is my hope and prayer for each one of us, including all of our judges and magistrates, and you and me, that we would exercise that power for a better Zimbabwe.
Well, thank you so much, Doug. Thank you so much, Dr. Musa. Thank you so much, Dr. Vusumuzi. As we close off today's discussion, it's clear that Chief Justice Malaba's retirement marks not just, the end of an individual tenure, but a moment to reflect on the lessons from his tenure, and also to think about what lies ahead and what to correct or to work on going forward. So our conversation has highlighted that while Malaba's departure closes one chapter, the real test lies ahead. And as Doug said, he encourages each and every one of us. Dr. Vusumuzi was citing, sections of the Constitution, and I was thinking, we also need to read. We also need to understand what's going on. We also need to ask, for accountability and transparency as well. And that's why I like this show so much. If you haven't followed Cite ZW, please do make sure that you follow Cite ZW here on X and join these discussions, and also follow us on Facebook. We are also on Facebook. We have exciting programs for you on Facebook. You can also subscribe to our YouTube page as Cite ZW, and the page for Facebook also is Cite ZW. We are also on Instagram and TikTok. Otherwise, it's been a lovely morning. Please have a lovely, lovely weekend, and join us again next week.
Thanks, Nhlanhla, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks, colleagues.